What will be the best performing asset in 2021? Write your response down below. Florian Grummes, Managing Director of Midas Touch Consulting, is back. Florian, I think we spoke a couple months ago and I opened it the same way. I asked the audience for their feedback and I asked you for your advice or your outlook. And you were right. We're going to play this clip of last time. And you had said that Bitcoin would be the best performing asset in 2020. The question that everyone wants the answer to, our viewers, S&P 500, gold, silver, gold mining stocks, or Bitcoin? What do you like the best? What do you think will win by the end of the year?
Bitcoin.
And you turned out to be correct. So we can talk about it again this year. We'll see if you're right again, twice in a row. By the end of the year, we'll follow up again. But right now, let's start with Bitcoin's price action. It's hit sort of a resistance level around $40,000. Would you agree with that statement?
Yes, and thanks for having me.
Yes.
Always a pleasure to be on Kitco.
Always a pleasure to have you, Florian. $38,000 is the price I'm looking at right now. Everybody was going crazy over Bitcoin a few weeks ago as it shot up from, the $20,000 mark, which was the previous all-time high in 2017, all the way up to almost $40,000, actually beyond $40,000 very briefly. And then it kind of went back down and it hovered around the $30,000 to $40,000 range. So what's going on right now? Is it consolidating? Is it waiting for a breakout? Is it waiting for a move downward? What do you think?
I think it's consolidating between the 30 and 40K level at the moment. So any prices towards 30K is already a good opportunity to buy in again or add to your position. Not sure if the breakout above 40K, 42K will happen in the next few days already, or if it needs a little bit more time. But overall, I'm still very bullish on Bitcoin. And I think over the next few months, we're going much higher.
All right, so let's walk through your case now. Why are you bullish on Bitcoin? Are there any fundamental drivers behind Bitcoin? And are there any technical drivers around Bitcoin as well?
Yes, I think there's massive drivers everywhere. The whole world basically is getting sucked in that kind of black hole of Bitcoin. The whole world is still short. Bitcoin has been the best performing asset over the last 10 years. Still, most of the people are not invested. Most of the institutional money is not invested. You see massive technology progress and development in that sector overall. It's obvious that the legacy financial system that we had for the last 50 years is not working anymore. So there is something new that is going to replace it very likely, and Bitcoin is the core or the center of it.
Yeah, is that concerning for you? What you just said, the whole world's getting sucked into Bitcoin. If the whole world is getting sucked into an asset, is that not, please correct me if I'm wrong, but is that not a bear case? My mother spoke to me on the phone 2 days ago, and she told me about Bitcoin. This is the last person you want talking to you about Bitcoin. And now I'm thinking, okay, something's going on. Maybe I should be looking out for a sell-off. What do you think?
No, you're right. From a general perspective, yes, you always want to be careful if your taxi driver or your grandma is talking about investments that are very much in fashion. But we have seen this many, many times already, and I think it's just repeating. And of course, Bitcoin can always have a pullback of 30, 40%. We've seen also many times pullbacks in that range, but I think overall, it will continue to march higher. The technical picture also is very good. We have this breakout above 20K. We've been running now to 42K, consolidating. This doesn't look bearish to me. This looks just consolidating on high levels and then ready to march higher. So,
yeah, I'd like to ask you about why somebody should buy Bitcoin now. I think 5 years ago, maybe even before then, 6 years ago, in its earlier days, you might consider Bitcoin a more speculative asset. Many people still consider it to be a speculative asset, but it's matured a lot since then. Would you consider it like gold a store of value? Would you consider it like gold an inflation hedge? Would you consider it like GameStop, for example, which we'll talk about soon, a speculation? If someone were to ask you, Florian, why should I buy Bitcoin right now? What is your answer?
I think it's all of it. You want to be part of this thing. I mean, obviously, nobody knows what will exactly happen in the future, but there is a massive trend in place, and you don't want to miss out on that. Yes, you have to act according to the principle buy low and sell high. So buying into the 40K range is a little bit risky, I would say. But if we have a pullback back again towards maybe 33, it could be already a pretty good risk reward ratio again. So
yeah, it's interesting to observe if you put everything in perspective. If you drop from 40K to 30K, that's a 10K difference. That's 10 on 40. That's a 25% drop. Everybody would think, wow, 25% drop. That's $30,000 is already much, much higher than the previous high. So if you bought it any time before the previous high, you would still be making money right now, right? So I wonder what a good entry point right now would be. Would you have to wait for a pullback? Or maybe now it doesn't matter anymore?
Well, first of all, let me say, I don't think that Bitcoin will ever pull again below the all-time high from 2017. So I don't think that Bitcoin will ever go significantly below 20K anymore. So your risk from where we are right now at 38K, you would, in the worst case, you would risk 18K if you buy one Bitcoin. So less than 50%. That's the downside that you have to accept. On the upside, I think short term, over the next few weeks, easily 50K. Over this year, easily 100K. My target for that bull run is around 300K. So even if you buy here at 38K, you can still make probably 7 or 8 times your money in that bull run. Yes, it's going to be a roller coaster. Yes, it's going to be very volatile. But if you sit on your hands and you don't buy with all your money, obviously putting everything on red is never a good idea. But if you keep a small position size, you should be fine and be able to run this bull much higher.
I have 2 questions for you, Florian. The first one, why do you think it won't drop below 20K? Well, let me rephrase. If it had to drop below 20K, what needs to happen?
I would say if it drops below 20K, something is wrong. And I would really seriously questioning my thesis about Bitcoin. So far in the last 10 years, Bitcoin never pulled below the former all-time high. So I think it's very unlikely that we see prices below 20K again.
So I guess for that to happen, you would need to see all the retail investors selling, all the institutional investors also selling.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. It could also be a technical bug, you know. I mean, that can happen. Then it can happen very fast. So you need to consider that this is, I think, the biggest risk in Bitcoin. And we had such technical glitches already a few years ago. And thanks to the miners, it all worked out well. But this is, I think, the most dangerous scenario, and we don't know if and when and how this would happen.
So you said this year 50 to 100K. I've heard a similar forecast actually that Bitcoin could reach $100,000 by 2021, sometime in 2021. So your forecast is actually in line with some other estimates I've received from crypto experts. Now let's go to your 300K call. I know that's maybe a bit more long term. I want to remind you the first time we spoke, Florian, you and I, was last summer, and you had broken the internet with your $9,000 gold call. You said gold will eventually hit $9,000. I don't want you to forget that. I don't want the audience to forget that either.
If you use the same ratio to today's numbers, we would end up having gold at some point in the future, $8,000, $9,000 gold.
I want to ask you this: what's going to hit that first? What's going to happen first? $9,000 gold or 300,000 Bitcoin?
I think 300,000 Bitcoin.
Okay.
Is more likely. Okay. You see that it takes time in the gold market, and I also told you back then in the interview that it will take a few years. So maybe within the next, let's say 4, 5, 6, 7 years in gold, that number becomes realistic. With Bitcoin, if Bitcoin does the same thing like in the last bull market, 2016 and 17, we're going to 320K this time.
Here's my question then. If people say that Bitcoin and gold are kind of the same in terms of the characteristics, in terms of the purpose, why would you still buy gold if you think Bitcoin has more upside?
Well, I want to have an asset that is independent of electricity, independent of free internet availability, and untraceable. And with a 5,000-year track record.
Yes.
I
Okay.
don't buy into the Bitcoin maximalist kind of thing that Bitcoin will replace gold completely. I want to have both. I've been saying this for many, many years already. And if the Bitcoin and the gold people actually would stick together, we would be able to much faster create a better financial world for everybody.
Right. What kind of financial world would that look like?
I think a free market kind of world, like, we've seen this manipulation again just a few days. You mentioned GameStop already. I think the idea was brilliant. I think it was fun to watch and very entertaining. I personally would not participate in such a thing.
Yeah.
But you could see the market, the reaction of the regulators. Immediately the next day, you couldn't trade the thing anymore. You couldn't cover, you couldn't get out of your options, whatever. They changed the rules.
Right.
And that's not, I think it's not acceptable.
Do you think what happened to GameStop last week happened to Bitcoin earlier last year? It went from under $10,000 to $40,000 in a very short amount of time, relatively speaking. Do you think something like that happened or not?
I'm sure there were people short Bitcoin and needed to cover, but I don't think that this massive rally in Bitcoin was driven by a short squeeze. I think
Okay.
the technical breakout above 20K was a clear, strong buying signal. And as you can see, I mean, more and more institutional investors are participating. They're actually getting forced to participate because it's always a comparison of your performance. And if you miss out the fastest horse, you don't look good anymore. And that will continue.
Okay. Now, I wanna ask you about gold very quickly before we move on to the other cryptos. Gold, I know you've studied gold a lot. That's part of your work. The LBMA has put out its regular analyst consensus forecast. So this is the analyst forecast for 2021. The average is 1973.8, so which is about 11.5% increase from today's levels. Do you think this is too conservative, or is this in line with your expectations?
I think for the average of the full year, it's probably okay or very likely or possible. Interestingly enough, this number is more or less around the important resistance zone that gold is facing at the moment. So the 1955 to 1965 stopped gold in early November and stopped gold again in early January. And now market is trying to get back on its feet, but it's still challenging. It looks a little bit weak. So gold needs to actually go through that number. And then, yeah, if it has a strong third and fourth quarter, it should be possible to have that kind of average price overall for the year. Right now, we are obviously far away from that number on average.
Well, why do you think that the average forecast is not above the last all-time high of over $2,000? Why are analysts not expecting, well, I guess the average in terms of the expectations is not higher than what we've already seen?
Well, I mean, the last few months have been certainly a little bit disappointing for many people in the gold sector. It should have been clear that gold needed some more time to digest this massive move higher between 2018 and the summer of last year. Gold gained nearly 80% in 2 years. Now it's digesting that basically massive rally. And it takes time. And obviously, there's no real trend and momentum in the market at the moment. It's moving sideways. It was very volatile, moving sideways over the last few weeks. And then analysts lower their predictions and expectations. And in the end of the day, you get that average number.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about one of the important drivers of gold prices, which is inflation. I know you've compared our situation to the Weimar Republic. And so I like to revisit that analysis very briefly and talk about if you still think hyperinflation is coming to the West, and if so, what that will do to gold prices.
Yes, I think this theory is still in place. I have no reason to change it. I told you that it will take a few years until it really gets parabolic and totally crazy, but you can see rising food prices everywhere. Everything is getting much more expensive. And in terms of Bitcoin, everything is getting cheaper. And gold has right now a little bit of a challenging time, but I just explained, I think it's basically because it had a massive uprun. It needs to digest those moves, and it will be ready in a few months. I guess it's ready to move higher again.
Yeah.
And I'm not worried. You also have to be very careful with the statistics. I don't trust any of those who want to calculate the exact inflation numbers. Most of those are basically using numbers that are not really representative. Most people don't buy every year a new TV, but they buy food every day.
Right.
And food prices are going up. So I think you have to be careful with these kind of statistics. In our day-to-day life, and I think most of the viewers will agree with me, things are getting more expensive. So, for example, health insurance, I think it's up 10% last year. You've seen most of the commodity prices going through the roof. Copper, super strong. You see agricultural prices moving higher. I think we're still in the early stages of a super massive commodity bull cycle, and that will be driven by inflation. And I mean, the money, the balance sheet expansion, which is driven by all the central banks all over the planet, is continuing. They have no chance to turn this around. So the purchasing power is getting destroyed by the day.
Well, what's coming first, Florian? The rise in commodity prices or the rise in overall inflation that's pushing up the commodity prices? Because remember, the base metals, they're required for construction, raw materials, for a lot of things. That could cause a ripple effect on inflation if, let's say, base metals go up. But I wonder what's first, right? You know, the chicken or the egg, what comes first?
I think it's happening all at the same time, and people slowly but surely changing their perception. That's, in the end of the day, the most important factor of it, right? Because if you expect prices to be higher in a year from now, you're going to buy today and not wait for a year.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and that's slowly but surely changing. I can see it in myself. I'd rather buy things now and instead of waiting a year, because I know it's probably more expensive in a year.
I had a friend ask me the other night, he says, I want to buy inflation hedge for my portfolio. What should I buy? And I said, look, the most direct instrument that I can think of off the top of my head is the TIP ETF, Treasury Inflation Protection Securities. It's meant to protect inflation. Other things that could protect inflation, Florian, what could they be?
Well, obviously it's gold and especially silver. Silver loves inflationary environment. I think physical silver is a very good way to protect yourself. And also, obviously, Bitcoin is a good way to protect yourself. And I also really like commodity stocks. If you have a diversified portfolio of commodity stocks, that means copper, nickel, maybe a little bit of oil, uranium, maybe even agriculture, I think you should be doing very well in protecting yourself.
Okay. Let's talk about, finally, the other cryptocurrencies now. I know you are bullish on Bitcoin. You've presented a case for that. What could possibly beat Bitcoin in the crypto world? Ethereum already has last year. Could it continue to outperform?
Yeah, I mean, Ethereum is really catching up over the last few days. It's now a new all-time high, above 1,700. It looks really good at the moment. I would be actually a little bit careful. Probably, I think next week the Ethereum futures are going to start trading. So that could be similar to what we've seen in December 2017 when Bitcoin futures started to trade. That could be maybe kind of an event for a profit-taking event, actually. So the market is basically anticipating the start of the Ethereum futures. And once they're finally trading, then it sells off. So that's something in the short term to be a little bit careful of. And we also see that all the small altcoins are going through the roof. So we are in altcoin season now. And that is also a warning signal that maybe over the next few weeks, we might see an intermediate top in those altcoins. Mm-hmm. And then probably it's going back to Bitcoin, and Bitcoin now needs to make the next move then before Ethereum and altcoins then can catch up again.
Do altcoins typically follow the bigger currencies like Bitcoin, or can they move in different directions?
They do. They move very volatile in different directions all the time. But there is a certain cycle, and usually it is that Bitcoin needs to run ahead, strongly, massively run ahead, and it did, right? I mean, Bitcoin broke through new all-time highs, had been running for, I think, 2.5 months. And now Bitcoin has been consolidating over the last 4 or 5 weeks, while now Ethereum is exploding. And once Ethereum takes the lead, then it doesn't take much more time, and the altcoins are catching up. So there is a certain cycle or a pattern to it. And the only warning signal that I have to give in the short term is, I think maybe a few more days, and then you probably want to take some profits. And I can only strongly recommend that these smaller altcoins, this is everything super speculative. You can participate if you want, but you need to buy low, you need to take profits. I recommend our quad exit strategy. That means you take 50% off the table rather quickly. And that actually gives you a very good mental setup to let the rest of your gains basically run higher.
Okay, great. And I'll close this conversation with the same question I asked you last time. What will be the best asset in 2021? What's your prediction this year?
Well, I think it's going to be Bitcoin again.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll follow up soon, I'm sure before the end of the year. So we can talk about this again and have an update. Thank you very much for coming on the show today, Florian. I appreciate your update today.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, David.
And thank you for watching. I'm David Lin. Stay tuned for more on Kitco.